Awesome. So recording is turned on now, and why don't we get started with where 2.8 is? Oliver, you want to give us some?
2.8 is out, and in fact, we've even done a 2.8.1 yesterday. I don't think we've tweeted about it yet, but we just pushed a fix for EKS especially. They do some weird load balancer stuff we had to integrate with.
In particular, today I learned EKS uses host names in the public IP address field for their load balancers, which was a unique learning experience, let me tell you. But we got it fixed. And Oliver, you were saying, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, and in 2.8 we make Grafana pluggable. Was that the first piece of the pluggable system? Yeah, so we're also in the process between 2.8 and 2.9, and hopefully not 2.10, but maybe, of splitting up the control plane to be more modular. And so especially a lot of the viz components can be added after the fact or out of band. So Grafana is the first piece we've done that with. Prometheus is the next piece we're going to do that with. And then I'd like to see that happen with the web controller and the tap controller and a whole bunch of the optional pieces that aren't required to run the control plane. Which also hopefully makes the system itself much simpler to operate, especially on upgrades.
Yep. And then obviously 2.8 had multi-cluster in it, which is why we're going to have Zahari here giving us an awesome demo. And then let me pull up the release notes, because there were all kinds of really great features in 2.8 that eventually went out. All right. I don't know how to use
2.8 is old news to me. I'm already focused on 2.9 stuff
now. The reason I'm looking up the release notes is that I have conveniently forgotten what is in the 2.8 release. So we threw in all of the multi-cluster stuff. Grafana is now optional. Jaeger is a optional add-on now as well, which is a great call out.
And so we actually linked that into the UI, right? So the Linkerd dashboard, you can click right into the Jaeger traces.
And you don't need to use our add-on if you want to have the link. You just put in your Jaeger URL and it all gets wired up.
Oh, that's really cool.
It's kind of, yeah, it kind of highlights the point you made about 2.9 moving into making all the components more optional, in that we're really making it so you can slice and dice the components and figure out how it all fits together. Because what we've learned, in particular, Prometheus, I think, has been the biggest learning experience for me. There are certain individuals running at a scale wherein there is no way for us to make Prometheus usable unless they go configure it themselves. And so Jaeger was kind of one of those obvious out of the box that way. And so everything in our add-ons has been making sure that we can connect and configure the two pieces together in a way that works, so you can bring your own stuff with you.
Yeah, also as folks get started, we want get the control plane installed and working first, and then figure out, there's so much more complexity in setting up all these other pieces that that should be a second step.
Right. Or you can still get out of the box and have a whole bunch of great stuff turned on, and then slowly turn it off as you realize the complexity of those pieces. Because our Jaeger add-on is, I'm going to use the word toy, which may hurt Tarun's feelings a little bit, but even the Jaeger team says not to use the all-in-one image for anything that's a production grade. So yeah, we're kind of going in that direction. I think those are all the big things in 2.8, unless someone reminds me otherwise. So I think we can go move into the 2.9 and what's in it. We already touched a little bit.
One of the other random things to mention in 2.8 is, well, no, we'll talk about that later. Sorry.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. 2.9. Let me double down on the Viz project, because I think it's a super interesting project and kind of, again, flows out of some of the things we've been learning. Grafana is another good example where while it's easy for us to ship a couple dashboards, most folks have their own Grafanas. And let's be honest, our Grafana doesn't do anything other than make it easy for you to demo stuff. So the Grafana links work to your Grafana now from our dashboard, and you can go and load our dashboards into your own Grafana and make it work. And I think this is really powerful once we start talking about the multi-cluster stuff, specifically because you may not want to have a full control plane in every cluster. You might want to just have a dashboard and Grafana running in your Apex cluster, and all of your Leaf clusters are simply running the local decision-making control plane. And so we're really making it a lot more modular so that you can figure out all of the bits and pieces that you run.
And I think, so one of the themes I want to tie between 2.8 and 2.9 is that we're slowly, really swinging the product to being more GitOps friendly, right? And so we've figured out some of the customized stories. We're figuring out a bunch of the kind of cert management stuff. And I think in some ways, we want to be out of the YAML maintenance business, right? As the Linkerd project, we are not the people who are best suited to craft your YAML for your clusters and manage those things. There's a lot of other projects that can do that. We're trying to, mostly ship you containers that you can use that do the job. And I think we're slowly leaning on Helm and customizing some of these other things more and more so that Linkerd doesn't have to deal with every set of configuration option that you may want to set, that you have other kind of more standardized tools for configuring Linkerd.
In particular, if anyone wants to see I'm going to use the words insanely complicated Helm chart, go take a look at what we've got today. And as we start to add in new add-ons, it just gets more and more complex. The tooling in the Kubernetes ecosystem is not set up to manage the kind of YAML complexity. And so splitting all of these out into little independent operating pieces, A, is obviously the Unix philosophy, but B, makes it so that there's a lot more opportunity for folks to take bits and pieces and own it and move on it independently.
Yeah, that's
right. Making an operator is even more complex. I'm with you. I think the real problem where Helm falls down is when you've got a packaged chart that everyone wants to use. It's impossible to make it so that you have a standard base that people override, I think, which is where Customize came from to begin with. And so we have to go make our core chart more and more complex just to handle interesting use cases. Like Nassim has got a PR at the moment to add persistent volumes to Prometheus, which is awesome. I'm so glad we have it, but man, I wish we didn't have to take that complexity on and there was an easier way to patch it. So I think the community as a whole is moving forward, and I'm super excited to see where it goes there.
Yeah, so we're focused on having the configuration area for the project that's kind of agnostic as much as possible of how you're templating your YAML and building that stuff. And it's a big focus of us to try to push out a lot of that configuration from the CLI and from the things you interact with in Linkerd to other tools that are better at that.
Yeah. Cool. What else is coming in 2.9, Oliver?
We're doing a bunch of cleanup on the HA ecosystem. So the HA install is kind of like a production-ready packaging, but it's got some loose edges, especially things like the CLI do checks and fail if any instances are down. So it's a little bit brittle from a user experience point of view. And so we need to go in there and do some refresh on the HA configuration and make sure it's coherent for folks and usable when it's degraded. Yep. I'm really excited about what started as the kind of TCP MTLS project. And so one of the real goals for 2.9 is that we can do MTLS for all traffic through the mesh. And that's kind of evolving into a larger overhaul of the discovery mechanism of the proxy and how the proxy does service discovery. And I think we have some opportunities to really reduce the overhead of discovery in the proxy by doing some smarter lookup-based stuff. And so that is, we're in design right now. We're doing a bunch of discovery that in that space. And so that will include, hopefully, server speaks first protocols so that we are able to do MTLS for protocols that we can inspect, but that will require some configuration, but I think it's a nice improvement if we can do that.
So
Go ahead.
one of the fundamental changes required to do MTLS for everyone is to switch our discovery from the host header inside of HTTP down to the SO original dest.
Right, and so there's still going to be multiple, like we still have to be able to do HTTP aware routing, because there's just reasons that we have to be able to do that. But the plan is that we'll be able to kind of seed that all off of one discovery per destination endpoint. And so we'll look up every IP you talk to, but from that we should have enough context to know everything that we have to do to serve those requests. But how that interacts with caching and some of these other things is where the complexity comes in. But on that side of things, we just landed yesterday, and it'll be in this week's Edge, a major overhaul of the proxies runtime. And so over the past year plus, the Tokyo ecosystem and the Rust ecosystem in general has overhauled to a new syntax. In fact, I think we had Eliza here a couple weeks ago to talk about some of these things. And on our first benchmarks, we've actually improved latency, a couple milliseconds in some cases, which is great. And we're going to continue to do some investment in deleting code now that we've done this. Now that we're on some nicer APIs, the hope is that we can delete some of the boilerplate code that we have to maintain as we fold this into the new discovery system. So there's a lot of exciting stuff going on in the proxy right now.
Yep. Nassim, just to answer your question really quick, we've looked at it, the protocol detection stuff or the annotations. I think we'll move in that direction, but it's not something that we're working on actively right now. I think I'd like to see the API move from a alpha to a beta before we go and really dig in on implementation there.
Yeah, it's hard for us to chase features that are alpha in the latest Kubernetes version, because it means that they won't be generally available for at least a year. And so our tendency is usually to do something that's Linkerd specific quickly, so we understand how it works, and then adopt the standard as it gets more broadly available.
Okay, so let me call out, or is that everything you've got for the MTLS, Oliver?
Let's see what we get here. We'll be adding TCP load balancing in order to do MTLS, which means you'll be able to skip kube proxy, which is a minor improvement. Yeah, I think that's the big push of that work is going to be in really setting ourselves up on the discovery system to be adding policy and adding circuit breaking and adding a bunch of the features that we want to start looking at in the 210 timeframe.
And to give people a little bit of a reason why this is important, other than the fact that MTLSing TCP is awesome, we want to be able to get to the point where you can start to describe policies on your cluster, in particular to be able to do mandatory TLS. And it's pretty tough to do that at just HTTP because it becomes a really weird story. And so once we're able to do the MTLS on TCP connections, we're then going to be able to start to implement ACLs and policy on top of that using traffic targets in SMI, and then you'll be able to start to do things like mandatory TLS and some really interesting policy.
Yeah, well, and we'll also be able to start servicing whether a connection is TLS, even if we don't terminate it within the proxy. So the proxy has its own identity system, which is kind of hopefully transparent to your application. And then if you're doing your own TLS in your application, we'll just treat it as TCP, but we don't really know anything about those connections now. But we can actually do some inspection on those in most cases and give you some metadata just based on a handshake.
Yep. And then let me jump into one of the features I'm actually looking forward to in 2.9. So multi-cluster came out, but we've got some really great opportunities to go and simplify things. One of them is putting in a better solution for load balancers that happen to have host names, aka AWS. But more importantly, we're going to be switching the model around a little bit. So at the moment, when you export a service, it's done on the target cluster side. And it kind of made sense when we were going through and doing the design of it. But once we started to use it a little bit more, we realized that some of the use cases didn't quite fit. And so we're actually flopping that around. And so the source cluster is going to be able to set a selector that pulls only the services it wants into it, with the advantage that now you can have a service mirror that only pulls in a single service instead of all of the exported services on a target cluster, which is pretty exciting.
And that will also let you, if you want to really customize the configuration, you can lock down RBAC and say, well, this service mirror is only responsible for this namespace, and you could do a service mirror per namespace, or it really enables a much more flexible model for access control and mirroring.
Yep, and we're going to be doing kind of a second pass on visualization and stats for the multi-cluster stuff, kind of matching what everyone is going to be hopefully giving us as feedback so that we can go and put in some pretty great visibility into how that's all working. While the check work that's there and the dashboard that Sahari put together in Grafana are awesome, we can do a little bit better there for sure.
But we are going to have to introduce the CRD, I think. So,
yep.
Sorry.
But honestly, I think,
yeah,
I think it's definitely worth it, in particular because we're moving from a single piece of configuration on the source cluster, aka the kube config, so the service mirror can connect to the target cluster. We're also adding the selector and maybe a couple other pieces of configuration, and so it'll be a CRD. William's going to have to go from 2 CRDs to 3, but it'll be worth it for sure.
The benefit of that will mean that you can interact with the gateways just through kubectl and get their statuses and things like that. So it'll be a much more ergonomic experience. We
haven't added a new CRD yet this year, William.
We'll see if he wants to do policy or not.
Cool. Let me look and see what else we've got in 2.9. So that's most of the main work. And then let me call out the 3 projects that we've been doing through Community Bridge and Summer of Code. So the one that I'm most excited about, not because of anything other than I love getting new Kubernetes features in, is Matei is going to be working on service topologies, which is a new feature in, I think, Kubernetes 1.18 and builds on top of endpoint slices. And the idea there is that we'll be able to do a little bit more topology-aware load balancing inside of Linkerd. Number one. Number two, the thing I'm actually excited about, if I'm honest, is the endpoint slices support, because the endpoint slices really fix a lot of the weird bandwidth system update issues that Kubernetes has had for quite a while. And so we're kind of embracing the new world now instead of later on that one in particular.
And it's also going to make us actually support dual stack IPv6 stuff probably,
right,
which is great. Yeah. And for what it's worth, we've made no assumptions around IPv4 in Linkerd that we know of today. But because Kubernetes is so baked into IPv4, there's going to be some growing pains in moving that over, I'm sure.
And then, so that's Matei. He's working through Community Bridge. Then we've got Ali, who's working through Summer of Code on getting us official ARM support. We have heard everyone loves to use Raspberry Pis as their home networks and labs, and we're going to have official ARM support, which is super exciting there.
Well, you're all going to be running Mac ARM in a year anyway.
Yeah, right. It was us looking to the future. Obviously, Apple was going to announce ARM.
So
Macs.
one of the things I want to call about service topology that's kind of interesting is in the summer project, I think we'll have basically on par with what Kubernetes already does, and it'll be driven by the control plane. And so that says if you are discovering from a pod and you have a node preference, you'll try to find another pod in the node, and you'll only use that. And you won't load balance or fail over to any other pod in the system until that pod's gone. So it's a pretty crude feature in Kubernetes at the start. However, I think because we're doing some investigation redesigning the service discovery system, my hope is that we can fold in some of the service topology logic into our discovery plans so that the proxies themselves can deal with the full topologies and make the failover and load balancing decisions kind of in a more natural way, a little kind of less crude, more available way.
Yeah, I think it's interesting in that one of the cool things about the Kubernetes ecosystem, if we ignore my bitching about alpha level APIs, is that as we go and implement it, we'll be able to chat with SIG networking and feed these back into when it eventually goes GA, so that there isn't just the ultra naive approach there is now, but actually something that works in a much more comprehensive way for everyone.
Yeah, and I mean, in fairness, I think they're approaching this from the TCP point of view, and there's really not much better you can do at the TCP level. But once we're dealing with kind of layer, HTTP and above, we can be a lot smarter around topology and routing and decisions. And that actually like mirrors what we did in Linkerd 1 to some degree with DTABs and name trees, which I know are an acquired taste, but they do express the kind of failover and preference decisions in a hierarchical way, which is what topologies do.
And then the last thing I'm going to bring up on 2.9 is something that Mank is working on, and it is conformance testing. And so the idea there is that check is really great, but it tests your cluster statically. It's almost like unit tests for your cluster and the Linkerd install. And the conformance testing is really taking all of the integration tests that you would run as part of Linkerd and making it so that everyone can run them. The idea being the next step in making sure that your cluster is set up and operating in a correct way when you get it up and running, more part of the predictability of Linkerd. And we've got that open for comments right now. I'm dropping the discussion into chat here, so you can all jump in and comment on that if you want.
The doc too. Yeah,
oh, good call. Thank you.
Yeah, what the so we see this as, if you're kind of trying to validate your platform, you're going to update your Kubernetes version, or you're going to customize your Prometheus, and you kind of got your YAML all baked, and you want to validate that Linkerd works end to end. We can actually schedule workloads through this and validate that things work in kind of a more mutatey way than we do with Linkerd check, which is really just supposed to be a read-only, does things look right. And this is all going to be built on Sonobui, which is a general framework from formerly Heptio folks to do this type of integration suite on Kubernetes. And so hopefully, if you're already using Sonobui, we can just add plugins to your system and give you a better conformance suite.
Awesome. Okay, so if you've got any questions about 2.9, let's save those to the end of the hour here. But next up is Zahari. Why don't you walk us through what you've got?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, Thomas already said that it's an awesome demo, but I've never been a guy who thrives under the spotlight, so we'll see whether awesomeness is guaranteed.
I feel like you're sandbagging.
Am I what?
I feel like you're sandbagging. This is going to be awful. Everyone's going to hate it, and then you're just going to, hit it out of the park.
Might be, who knows? But actually, the motivation behind this little demo is that we've obviously talked quite a lot about multi-cluster, and we've demonstrated a few workflows, but most of the stuff we've talked about is mainly around scenarios where you are doing failover or you're doing traffic splitting across clusters in prod environment. But as I've experimented a bit more with it, I realized that there is a use case that's very valid for developers that want to actually pair with a remote prod cluster and have a workflow where they're iterating quickly while relying on connectivity to a prod or a pre-prod environment in order to be able to develop and iterate quickly. So that being said, I'll share my screen here. Okay, so I hope everyone sees my screen. Yeah, no? Cool.
I can
So
see it. You might want to make your font a little bigger though.
again, okay. Let me- That's better.
Yep, looks good.
Okay, cool. So right here I have two clusters, right? One is prod that's running on GCP, and as you can see, it's running the probably well-known emoji application. And locally, and that's all meshed. It's running Linkerd, and it has a gateway running on it. So there is a multi-cluster capability installed on that. So, and also these services are exported. So emoji and voting services are exported. So if, for example, I want to iterate quickly and actually develop locally and make changes to the web service while taking advantage of all the data and the states that's in these services that are on prod, I can utilize multi-cluster, the multi-cluster functionality to do that. And so, yeah, so here on my dev cluster, I have, well, just Linkerd installed, and I don't even have the service, the mirroring controller running. And currently, I have a tilt setup where if I do tilt up,
For those who
I'll
don't
be able.
know, Tilt is a really awesome tool that lets you do development locally on Kubernetes things and automates doing Docker builds, reloading your pods when you make changes, that kind of thing.
Yeah, hopefully. And it's great when it actually works. Okay, yeah, sure. So, so yes, that's currently when I do anything that changes about this particular deployment. So if I do a local change, it's gonna actually redeploy it again onto the cluster. And at the moment, I have this only the web service running locally. Yeah, so currently you can see that I have the web service running, and unfortunately, however, it's not showing anything because that's the only thing that's running. The voting service is not running, and even if it was running, it might be the case that it doesn't have enough data, right? So what I can do in this particular situation is that I can go ahead and install the multi-cluster service mirroring controller locally on my dev cluster, right? So, and now it still is not paired with anything that's with any other cluster, but at least I can do that now. So yeah, we don't really have any gateways, but what we can do is that we can we can actually pair it with our yes, we can pair it with our prod cluster, and now we see that we have two services that are mirrored, and these are in fact the services. Oops. Yes, these are in fact the emoji services, and you can see that because they are mirrored because they have the prods appendix on, which is effectively the name of the prod cluster. So now the cool part is that we can actually see that there is data that's showing up, because right now these services, they are mirrors of them that are on the local cluster, and our emoji web application can actually connect to them. So and that allows you to iterate fairly quickly when you're developing stuff locally, but want to leverage all the rest of your infrastructure that's potentially running in the cloud. So what we can do here, for example, we can go and make a change to the web service. And if I remember correctly, this should now actually trigger a build. And we should be able to see this service updating. Yeah, and it's actually building the container at the moment. So it's redeploying it. As a matter of fact, this tilt service is actually quite smart. You can do a lot more clever stuff with it. So these rebuilds of the containers and everything can be a lot smarter and a lot faster. But unfortunately, it's the first time I use it, so I couldn't really figure out exactly how to do that.
So just think of it, you're only running web on your dev cluster?
That's correct.
That's cool.
So I'm running only web locally, and I just made a change, and yes, and I renamed that to the dev. So
this actually goes back to a question that Nassim asked just a minute ago about having your stateful DBs in another cluster. Well, I wouldn't necessarily do that for prod. Imagine this in dev, where you can actually be working with all of the data that you've got in your staging or prod cluster, replicate potential issues that you've never been able to replicate, and more importantly, not need to be running a database and 20 different services to serve up your application while you're doing dev on one specific instance locally on your laptop. In fact, I think this is the use case I am most excited about with our multi-cluster implementation.
Yes, exactly.
Oh,
and yeah,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you.
No, I was just going to say that I've been in situations where I need to do exactly this, right? Like I need to test a small change in a service that's mainly just visualizing data somehow that's derived from a few other services that are, and just spinning all of that mock infrastructure or being able to kind of replicate that kind of stuff, all of the state of the rest of your system. It's getting really arduous, and yes, this particular functionality is I think can help with that. And in fact, I've been in this situation way before Kubernetes was so popular. So now we have the tools to actually do that, which is pretty great.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one place where you would have kind of the remote database pattern, or Nassim's question, is when you're doing like the inverse multi-tenancy, where every team has their own cluster and you basically have services that are fronting the data for each team. But that's not the most common use for multi-cluster that we see, really.
Yeah. And as you can see here, obviously we have to validate Oliver's question, like there is currently here only the web service that is running on this local cluster, and all the rest are remote, right? These are services that actually don't have any pods behind them locally. They are all routed to the
yeah, and in
cluster.
2.9 you should be able to have about half as many Linkerd pods running when you do this. Is what we're working towards.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and yeah, you can see here that through this gateway, there's just 2 services that are being mirrored at the moment. So yes, that's mostly what I wanted to show.
Awesome. Thank you, Zahari.
Thank you.
All right. Now we're to my always favorite section of the community meeting, Linkerd Heroes. Charles, you want to take it?
Yep, you bet. That was a really awesome demo, by the way. I like the way that you split the traffic out between the services. So, Linkerd Heroes. We have so many, I think, especially around release, and it's so nice to see everybody contributing. I will, let's see, how about I'll pick Tarun to pick somebody to nominate. We'll just go around and everybody can nominate somebody. I have somebody in mind, but I'll let Tarun go first. Oh, is he muted?
Someone's got unmuted. Yeah.
There we go.
I mean, obviously, Nazim has been working on the Prometheus, the persistent stuff, and everything. We had some really great helps. Help PRs all this while, especially regarding Prometheus. Like even because that's what I have been working on. So all the PRs that Nazim did will go into that. Will go into this add-on model now, very smoothly. So it will be a great thing. Like once we have the full add-on model here, and I would also nominate Mayank, especially because he has been working on the Linkerd to Conformance. One of the things that he did awesome was that he got all the best practices from the Linkerd to repo into that repo. So the repo looks the same, works very similarly. The tests are very similar to what we wrote. So it's kind of great for both reviewers and also for users who want to just run stuff easily without having to learn new things.
Awesome. So did you say 2 people there? You said Mayank and somebody else?
Mayank and
or just
Nazim.
Mayank?
Yep.
Nazim. Oh yeah. Okay. Two staples of the heroes list for sure. Let's see. How about you, Thomas?
I'm going to call out Alex this time, specifically because let me tell a little bit of a story. So we're ready to release 2.8. And someone drops into Slack and goes, hey, I was just trying out the edge and it doesn't work on EKS. What's up with that? At which point I go, I'm going to have a serious conversation with the QA team, AKA me, for not going and testing multi-cluster on EKS. We went through with the launch because it worked everywhere else. And Alex jumped in, and basically in a week, we've got a 2.8.1 that fixes it on EKS. And it's awesome that we were able to get a fix in fast so that we could start to use EKS, because that was a big miss for us. And I'm so happy that we've got it all fixed and working and stable now.
Yeah, and Alex has done a bunch of the planning for the next set of multi-cluster work, which is super exciting.
Yep. I'm totally glad you mentioned Alex, because like Tarun, I have 2 people that I was going to nominate, and one of them was Alex, specifically because of that EKS issue. And because he fixed it, it now allows me to do more demos. So since Alex got Ali, who is, as you mentioned earlier, our GSOC student who's working on the ARM stuff. He and I have been working to get the builds out and get the CI implemented, and he's doing a great job. And so he's my hero. There's a good chance he will continue to be my hero until the end of GSOC, but and beyond. truly. That's my nomination. How about you, Oliver?
Let's see. I think I'm gonna go with two. I don't want to double up on anyone that I've done recently, but let's see. So first, I want to go with like a big shout out to the Rust community, and especially the Tokyo community there. And so, we've been pretty slow and conservative about upgrading to the new ecosystem, and they've done a ton of work there. Carl and Sean and Kevin Limecooler and Eliza, Lucio, John Jenset. There's just a boat. What about boats? Or without boats is his name. Their name. Without like a ton of work there, it would have not been possible for us to just do the upgrade. And the fact that we can do the upgrade and have a stable runtime, and there's a bunch of code change on our side, but as far as usability and performance, it's only gotten better. So it's really, really awesome that we have such a great community around us. And in that, I should call out that we did a security audit with the Rust TLS maintainers, and CNCF sponsored it. And the results of that are online and really good. There's some minor issues that we need to follow up on. Of course, with security audits of code, you can't prove that they're correct, but you can find problems, and they did not find any major problems, which is really good. So we'll continue to find ways to invest in that. And the other person I'd love to call out, I think is on the call, Lutz, has been, CypherFox on GitHub has been super patient about getting some big changes in, has been patient with us while we get our release together. I think we just merged one of them, or about to merge one of them. So I really appreciate when folks take time to get changes over the line and care about making things better. So I really appreciate all the help there.
In particular, I think that's a great one because the changes to the Helm charts were 100% non-trivial. And it wasn't just a couple little updates. It was pretty massive changes, including CI tests and all kinds of things that weren't visible from the beginning. And while that PR took way longer than I would like to admit to get merged, it is a fantastic one, and it's so helpful for the project.
Yeah, and these are the things that take a lot of feedback because we don't entirely understand at first how to make the changes, and so there's a lot of learning together. And I really do value that we have a community that learns with us in these ways.
Yeah, 100%. And as you were talking through that, two things occurred to me. One is that you nominated an entire different community as your hero, and the other is that you like Tarun and myself and Thomas, you have multiple people that you're calling out that you're seeing doing work. And so I think it's really just a sign that the community is growing, the team, that everybody's working together. And so before I put Zahari on the spot, I'd like to invite anybody who wants to nominate somebody else, please drop a name in chat and we'll give a shout out to those folks as well. So with that, Zahari, I'm going to put you on the spot one more time. And I'm sure you won't sandbag this one, but do you have any nominees in your mind?
Is it like I haven't really given any nominees before, so can I actually repeat somebody who's already been nominated?
Yeah, or you can nominate yourself. That's fine too.
Yeah, that's good. You can nominate yourself.
For example, William just tried to nominate himself.
I think so. Yeah, I'll actually nominate two people. I'll nominate Alex for the same reason that Thomas nominated him, because I think that fix was incredibly important and it was executed with, under a great deal of urgency, and it works great. So I think that's pretty amazing to see that we have such incredible people around. And I'll also nominate Willem for not getting mad about introducing another CRD into Linkerd, something that probably not a lot of people will be able to accomplish.
You're not supposed to reward him for this.
That's great. Awesome. And then I see a nomination in here for Thomas from David. I hope I said that properly. Just for all help in the Slack channel, which is 100% true. So, and you know, it's just to add to that, Thomas is really active in Slack. Oliver's active in Slack, and it's great to see folks who aren't necessarily or like new folks who are coming in and who have answers to questions. It's just so great, and it really makes me excited to see the community growing. So if there are no, so we see Eliza's got a second, which I think is either on William or Thomas, but that's good. So with that, for Thomas, great. Oh, we've got Lutz is nominating Alejandro for pointing out typos and an improved CI release process. So yeah, this just warms my heart. It's so great to see all these folks being nominated, and you know, reach out to folks, say hi, ask your questions, and we'll always be there for you in Slack. So with that, when we're talking about questions, it's time, unless I'm missing something, Thomas, it's time to play Stump the Maintainer. So I've got a couple of preloaded questions here, but is there anybody in chat who wants to ask a question, or on the Zoom call who wants to ask a question?
You'll want to raise your hand and or just drop it directly into Slack, by the way.
Yeah, I would just ask in
Just
the
about
chat.
to say. Okay, well, let me, I've got a couple here. So one is less technical, but I think it might be kind of helpful for folks. What's your process for solving a difficult problem?
Do you want to direct that at Charles?
Anybody, yeah, or yeah, Oliver, Thomas.
Procrastination.
I think. You know, I've heard that's true.
Running my head against the wall until the wall breaks.
That's kind of my process as well.
I mean,
to be more
seriously, showers. Showers are a big part of my process. Sometimes more than one a day.
Yeah. A big thing for me, I think, is something that folks don't realize, which is availability bias. Specifically, you don't know what you don't know. And so it's easy to make assumptions about how something came together. In fact, the multi-cluster stuff we've been working on, Zahari, we've been working on it for like almost 8 months now.
The whole year, yeah.
And the first 2 or 3 months of that were just us trying a bunch of different solutions to see which ones stuck and spending a bunch of time talking with users. And so like a major part of this whole design is something that was basically quiet because you couldn't really see it. We were just iterating and trying to figure out new ways to solve stuff. And that was kind of the whole process. And I think it's important to call that out, is that like, it is all about iteration and quickly getting feedback and figuring out where to go, instead of having this ivory tower built on your first try. I've tried to build the ivory towers.
The other thing, actually, it's like the opposite of procrastination, but we try to focus on the hardest part first. Like if you start just doing work on the easy things and don't do work on the hard thing, it's much higher of a chance of running into big problems later. And so wherever we like really don't understand, you know, important pieces. So like multi-cluster, the question is like, what's the gateway logic? Like when we're in the gateway, how do we make decisions about routing? And that really informed a lot of the design from there. Yeah, awesome. So like move the big rocks first is generally the.
Got it. So practical examples are do the heavy lifting first, move the big rocks, be aware of availability bias, and more showers. That's the takeaway for being productive.
Cleaner is
you know, like asking around in Linkerd dev chat also helps from time to time.
Okay, thank you. And I have one more question, which is I think a little more technical. And I don't see clean hands, right? Clean code. That's right. I don't see any other questions in chat, so I'm just going to keep asking mine. Why is there such a thing as server speaks first protocol? And how does it know what the client is, and why is it difficult to get to handle that protocol?
The why is because there's no rules against it. I mean, right? You just TCP doesn't dictate it. SMTP is a great example of a server speaks first protocol. MySQL is another really obvious big one. And so there's certain times, or in the designer's mind, where they want the server to identify its version first, and then the client changes its behavior based on whatever server announcement, right? So when you connect to an SMTP server, it says, I'm an SMTP server, and here are the features I support, and then the client knows how to interact with it and how to start negotiating with it. That's the opposite of how HTTP works, where the client sends a request, and that needs to be sent, and the server has to deal with all the complexity of knowing, how do I handle this request? What version do I support? And so it's kind of a design of like, who is more flexible? Is it the client or is it the server? And as the kind of rise of web services has really taken hold, that server-centric view of the world of like, I can maintain compatibility in the servers, and I don't have to be a client that knows about every possible server feature I support, has been a more dominant pattern. So I mean, I'm sure there's still new server speaks first protocols being written, but they are, I think, a lot less graceful to things like, middle boxes and proxies that need to make kind of routing decisions on these things without a lot of extra context.
That's awesome. That clarifies so much for me. Thank you. I hope that helped other people as well, as much as that helped me. Awesome. Well, I think we're at about our time. And Thomas, anything you want to say or do to wrap up, or Oliver, anybody?
The question from Ivan, we're renaming the master branch to main. No, will there be any effects on existing PRs? Yes, that's true. We've done that for almost all of the Linkerd repos. I don't think Linkerd 1's been done. Linkerd 2 has not been done yet. And probably some of the auxiliary ones have been left around, but the proxy's been upgraded. The API has been updated. I think it'll be a minimal disruption. It sounds like other folks who have gone through this, GitHub handles it pretty well. But we will keep the master branch around for a couple days until we've made sure that all the PRs are updated. But if we have to go update them manually, it won't be the end of the world. And the main branch is already there, and it's been keeping in sync with master. And I think it'll be pretty minimal. The thing you'll have to remember to do is train your fingers to type a little differently. That's about it.
We'll type less. It's better.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's
right.
it.
Cool. Yeah. Right on time almost. So it was great to see everybody. A lot of familiar faces. I'm glad that y'all came here month after month. We'll have some hopefully good updates next month. I already have some ideas of who the heroes might be, but we'll find out.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's great to see everyone, and we will catch up with you on the interwebs. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. Good to see you.